What's up guys, the Strong Boys 19 here, and welcome to a new album review. Today I am going to be reviewing the latest studio album from, as many times as I will say it until this point, that I will not repeat myself again, the new album from my favourite band of all time, Slipknot, entitled The End So Far. So The End So Far is the band's 7th studio album in their entire discography, and this is the follow-up to their critically acclaimed album, their first UK number one in nearly 20 years, of 2019's album of We Are Not Your Kind. We Are Not Your Kind has absolutely been one of my favourite Slipknot albums, and I also mentioned it as one of my favourite albums from the last decade. It had a very unique and creative burst on various influences, incorporating newer styles and sounds along the way, with some other influences on ambient, drones, and to me, a very consistent shift that Slipknot did do after the release from their 2014 album of Point 5 The Great Chapter. So with Slipknot into album number 2, into this path in the band's history, this is, to this point, for many fans, I will have to personally address this as that while this is a very confrontational and different album that many of us have got to experience into what Slipknot can really do next after We Are Not Your Kind, for me, The End So Far is maybe the most ambitious album yet in the band's discography. But when I listened to this album a lot of times, I will have to think that The End So Far has to be respected so much more than what the reception did get at this point at the moment, because I know that many fans have reacted to this album really critically or negatively. As open-minded as I can be, loving various genres, different stuff along the ways into any period of music, The End So Far is the biggest amount of the compromise that Slipknot did decide to achieve, I think very successfully, because this is a very unapologetic album. They basically just have zero fucks given, and when you listen back into the earlier stuff, yes, we did love the eras and mentalities of the self-titled album and Iowa, and then the band had sweetened and changed their sound in various ways and lines, instrumentally into lots of melody to production and occasional strengths along the way. I do appreciate that this album was made to be taken into its own different context. And I know I say different quite a lot already in this review, but that is literally what this album is than anything they've done before. This is the final album to be released through the Roadrunner Records label, since they have been signed to Roadrunner back in 1998, and Joe did the production for this album, his first time being producer for this band, and I'll get to the production later on into the review. The first track on the album is completely the opposite to what you would really expect to hear from Slipknot. The opening track of Adderall. You know, when you hear the disturbing and just this uncomfortable setting on opening tracks from albums like on Self-Titled and Iowa, and even something different like on All Hope Is Gone, etc. Well, Adderall is the first time hearing a full Slipknot opening track in its separate context. This opens on a minor set of flowing chords, and it eases into, for a few seconds, the cacophony of industrial noises, which then switches immediately into this mid-paced, moody keyboard-driven sound, and the bass follows the beat with the drums all the way through the song. So the music to this one was, as I said in my album reaction, totally unexpected. And this is like a prog or like a soul type of feel to it. Corey sings very well, and his cleans sounded great on this song. The chorus, when I listen to it, does have that feeling, like it takes me into like the classic sound of soul music, and the choir's backing vocals did sound beautiful when the chorus just follows the song all the way through, and Alessandro's bass lines as well are incredibly impressive, and he's just as a great gifted bassist, just like what Paul Gray was. And there were points into this track later on where you hear some more additional guitar sounds to drone the tone while the music progressed. I really like this song. This has a somber and quiet movement. It was a song that did grow on me surprisingly very quickly, and I think that this was a perfect song to begin the album. Then we hear The Dying Song, one of the singles to this album. Vocal harmonies to start the track, and I thought it was always unusual, but it has that anthemic feel about it, like from the start to the end. The band here sounded so slick, following the groove, continuing that tradition of their sound, and Jay Weinberg sounded awesome and stylistic on here. Some of the riffs were great, especially like onto the pre-chorus and verse sections, and I think that the bridge section was the strongest part of the song, as it was memorable, just like the chorus, but the rest of the song did sound so catchy. The song eventually did grow on me as well. I like it quite a lot, but in terms of the whole product, this was, to me, not as one of the best songs on the album, in my opinion. Corey's vocals were ferocious, like onto the last final legs with his screams into the track. So I was tiny bit underwhelmed with this song at first, but like I said, I've listened to the album more and more times, and I think that The Dying Song is a very, very neat song to be placed and added in with the whole track listing. To me, the best single on the album is the first single The Knot has ever released back in November, before this album's completion, of the Chapeltown Rag. And the beginning just makes it like a classic old school intro of previous Slipknot periods. Great scratching from Sid Wilson's wizardry onto his DJ skill, and then the band were on fire immediately afterwards. The music was, to me, one of the band's strongest, as musically it felt brutal, but it did feel tighter at the same time. The verse sections to the blast beats, which to me still kicks ass, and it just annihilates. I love that bit the most every time I hear this song. The chorus, though, to me did distract and derail the adrenaline from it, though, but the overall song, to me, was better with its own strengths and power that was surrounding it than the last track to me. The whole band sounded wicked and stunning, as that the song just has so many balls and punches, and I did love a lot of the whole structure the more I was diving into the whole thing in the first place. It's got that instant approach of them being in full contact and control, and the Chapeltown Rag is one of my favourite songs on this album. Then the band decides to take things down with their last single prior to this album's release of Yen. And this takes things into something a lot of a mellower, minor yet darker feel to it. And there's a lot of that haunting atmosphere from the turntables and the ambience from both Sid and Craig together. Lyrically, this is basically like a love song. Corey decided to write this song for his wife, and I appreciate the idea behind it, but in my eyes, it did not make it as one of the creative ones and better parts into the track, because I am not keen into the whole sound on the way these lyrics were written. So that means it's not one of the best in the songwriting aspect. Pretty big onto the aggressive moments, and the pacing did work very consistently, but the more I think about the song, this has unfortunately got to be one of those that did not come across as one of the other favourites on this record. It's great to hear more on the bass into the mix and Sid's scratching bridge section appearance, but it's not one of the highlights on this album and one of my least favourites. Hive Mind is a pretty interesting one. Lyrically is onto like a separate purpose. Corey was making lyrics that it's based on when you're with a group of people, but you still feel like you are being yourself, but there was that feeling that you just don't like being involved with a group of people because of the no connection thing on it, like you're just being caught in the moment. And I get where he is saying, though. The beginning onto the track started things unsettling and eerie, and then the awesome blasting from Jay once again bursts in with these grunty guitars that match in. The whole musicianship on this track brings back the edginess of that faster and energetic move. The song overall did sound pretty good, and the structure was persistent and continuing the overall theme of what the song is about. And I still do think that the ending to the track is very similar to the end of Sulphur, weirdly, from obviously All Hope Is Gone. It's, for me, not a very dynamic song, but it's decent for what it is. Warranty is a song that I have a bit of a difficulty connection-wise with. The band started in a well-precise matter. They sounded awesome on this track, and lyrically this time, Corey writes about the whole metaphor speaking from anyone who they think they own it when it comes to the band themselves. To me, is the weakest distraction on this song, because the opening lines to the later lyrics, they are, to me, one of Corey's weakest lyrics yet. But all that aside, the places on the additional drum fills and percussive feel did work in that creative direction, instrumentation-wise, to me, filling itself with violent assaults, like on the breakdown pause sections, and it's a pretty powerful menacing touch by the surroundings of this massive sound of Slipknot, because they did sound incredibly vicious on this song. I do like this song on the instrumental side, despite the set of the lyrics. However, the next track, personally my least favourite song on this album, is Medicine for the Dead. Like on Yen, this opens on this dark presence, the experience of depression and about the dangers of that whole thing. And it's pretty reflective into this imagery mindset onto the song's meaning. And it's one of the other brutal and punishing moments, as the band made a lot more intensity, melody that did deliver in that vibe. But personally, for me, I give it a lot of the props as well, but it did not match up to me as another one that I really enjoy a lot. Because there were times this song, pacing wise, did drag on and it did feel pedestrian, so I wasn't feeling so attached by what's going on. But I do appreciate it for what it is. But this is one of those songs that I could personally do without. My favourite track on this album, onto the experimental path on this album, is Acidic. This track goes in this whole creative spark because instrumentation, the band was brooding and presenting a bigger variety than before, and the main riffs from both Mick and Jim did sound, for me, weirdly enough, like on something on a Gojira. The bass lines as well, again from Alessandro, were terrific, and his bass tone was crisp. Drumming to the percussion did add things better because they have their own distinctive part on matching the magic behind this song. There's a ton of these amazing ideas that for me did work, and this is one of the best ones on this record in that whole stylistic direction. Heirloom is one of the songs that I don't see a lot of the comments really give a lot of the positives for, because I think that this is probably the most underrated cut, and the beginning on the drums from Jay adds the rhythm to drive the song. The more I listen to this track, this is like on this more simplistic, it did grab me onto its action on stomping beats. It did sound incredibly expressive this time, like on his own clean melodic tones. The riffs to the song were pretty versatile over time, and the song was becoming really expansive. These phenomenal skills from both Mick and Jim, like when they did work together, to me they've always been masters. Deals on to the battling through and overcoming the domestic abuse. And I really like this one so much as well. Potentially this is one of the other gems on this record. Hell is, to me, just as manic as Slipknot can really get. This just dives in with this, like a similar anthemic progression, like I said about the Dying Song, because this track does have that similar vein, but it is one of the band's heaviest yet. On this one, Corey does this new metal return, fast rapping style, and the sound of the rest of the band sounded stunning on here. It is angry, it is wicked. I do love it when the band just means it this way, as they just have zero fucks given, especially like what Corey had his own explanations behind the meaning on this song, because there's so much hate on this track, and it's got pummeling beats, great efficiency on their phenomenal quality of talent. This is like the shape of things to grow more on that hateful mindset like they've done previously. There are occasional references on a bit of that mental health idea into the lyrics. This side, the second to last track, really strong on here. I do love this song. The percussion and ambient textures come in, things in a progressive flow into the song's music, more drama to it, as Corey at some points felt desperate, but the rest of the other sounds going on, it is pretty expressive, and there was so much of that chemistry. There were points where some of the guitar playing did sound pretty sludgy and like a prog metal. There's a lot of ideas, and a lot of the time, a song like this does nail it right on the head. The final song on the album, Finale. I love this song. I love Finale. Gorgeously melancholic. It doesn't have to be impending. It didn't need to be over the top. It did not need to have like the most agonizing, destructive shit to finalize everything. Finale is, to me, like on the last track, to me, a pretty emotional, and this one like a moving, especially like onto the whole melody into this track. Slower direction this time around, full of bliss. To hear a lot of the choir to be involved with this one so much more, like they did on a bit with Warranty and with a lot on Adderall. Finale to me is perfect. It's a perfect closing song to finish everything that the End So Far did surround itself for the whole album listener of myself and yourself. This is a wonderful climax to conclude everything on the record, and this is, out of all of the other softer tracks in Slipknot's reputation and history, Finale is one of my favourites that I think the band has ever achieved, because not only it is, like I said, pretty moving, but it's got that innocent and soft, but this, I guess, like a musical type of fashion. Finale finishes everything that Slipknot has ever done on this album, and with their history, with Roadrunner Records, as a complete piece of art. And I can't say this enough, that this is one of the best songs in the later direction of Slipknot that they've ever done, in my opinion. The End So Far by Slipknot, to me, is an open-minded album that has to be respected. You cannot expect Slipknot to go back and repeat the same stuff that they've done before. Although there were criticisms that I did say on some of the tracks here, I do understand what Jim Root did have to say, because I did express some of the negatives on some of the songwriting on this album, but I don't see this as a complete rushed product. There were gripes on some of the writing, and I think there were times into some of the structure moments on some tracks that it was sometimes abrupt or not as inventive or this complete formula. But with a lot of the positives that I've said on this album, this is, like I said, an ambitious record. It's so passionate, it's confident, and, you know, what can you really say about Slipknot just going right ahead to do whatever they want to make? They have their own creative freedom, as I think every single artist and band should do exactly that same thing. Positively or negatively, with the listener and various reactions, I don't really care, because at the end of the day, my opinions are my opinions, and you would feel the same way as well. The production on this album, the more I listened to the guitars, to the drums, I did like them, but I have a bit of that mixing issue, like I did think about the mixing to myself on The Grey Chapter. The production on We Are Not Your Kind, to me, was fuller, it was better, and it was perfect the way it sounded. But with The End So Far, mixing-wise, was a little bit underwhelming for putting everything into this huge mix. And that's another bit of a gripe that I will have to say as well. But with all of these words being said in this lengthy review, that's personally all I would like to say about The End So Far by Slipknot. Let me know what you guys think of this album in the comments down below. I am really curious to see what you think about this album. Is this one of the Knot's best albums? Do you think otherwise and the opposite? I am looking forward to see what your comments are. I'm going to give The End So Far by Slipknot, I will say, as a very acceptable and a brutally honest way to give this album an 8 out of 10. An 8 out of 10 for Slipknot's new album. And I know that sadly this is not going to be one of my top favourite albums of the year, but I want to be moving myself away from me being biased, because I'm just as biased as many Slipknot fan, and I just want to be more open and to say what I really want to say than to be incredibly predictable and so obvious. I think I feel a lot more better the more I was diving into what I want to address in this review here, and I'm really glad that I did eventually do this review for my favourite band, Slipknot. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll keep you guys and maggots posted for more videos in the near future.